Sasha stood in front of her bedroom mirror, watching her reflection. It watched her back, the same set of piercing blue eyes, the same pale skin. But tonight, something was wrong. She leaned closer, squinting at her own reflection, half expecting it to blink out of existence. Her heartbeat quickened. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what was different, it was just a feeling, a tingling awareness that prickled at the back of her neck. Every instinct screamed that she should look away, but her gaze remained locked. There was no movement in the room, no draft from the closed window. But the reflection's eyes. They felt alive, glinting with an intensity she couldn't explain. As if the mirror had swallowed all the air, Sasha felt her throat tighten. She took a small step back, her socks shuffling on the hardwood floor, but her reflection stayed motionless. It felt like her own eyes were mocking her, a gleam of challenge in them. She glanced down for just a second, grounding herself. But when she looked up again, her reflection wasn't alone. A dark shape loomed behind her in the mirror, vague and flickering like a figure in a shadow. She gasped, spinning around. The room was empty. Sasha took a few ragged breaths, her eyes darting from corner to corner. But everything was still, silent, and the darkness from outside seemed to cling to her walls, thick and suffocating. She looked back at the mirror. Her reflection was normal again, just her, wide-eyed and alone. "Get a grip," she muttered to herself, shivering. She turned away from the mirror, her thoughts spinning. She'd been so distracted lately. She was always tired, constantly on edge. It was probably the stress. The therapist her mom insisted she see had suggested journaling, but that felt so juvenile, so useless. She wasn't crazy, she didn't need help. And yet, every night, it was getting worse. Every night, it felt like she wasn't alone. She closed her eyes, rubbed them, and opened them again. For a second, she thought she heard a voice, low and murky, a sound barely brushing the edge of her awareness. "Sasha." The whisper clawed into her brain, soft and close, like someone was leaning right into her ear. Her breath hitched, her blood running cold. She whipped around, scanning the room, but there was no one. She forced herself to look at the mirror again, feeling her heart hammering in her chest. The reflection stared back, motionless, yet there was something strange in her own eyes. They looked distant, unfamiliar. "Stop it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're imagining things." She stumbled out of her room, her hands shaking as she closed the door behind her. Her parents' laughter echoed faintly from the living room below, comforting in its normalcy. She crept down the stairs, leaning against the wall, the warmth of the lights pressing back against the cold that had seeped into her skin. "Hey, sweetheart," her mom said, looking up from the couch. "You look pale. Are you feeling okay?" Sasha tried to smile. "Yeah, just tired. I think I'll get some water." Her mom gave her a worried look, but Sasha turned away before she could say anything. She grabbed a glass from the kitchen cabinet, filling it with water from the tap, the familiar hum of the faucet a welcome distraction. She took a sip, letting the coolness soothe her. But as she raised the glass to her lips again, she noticed something. The reflection in the glass. For the briefest moment, she saw herself, not as she was, but twisted, with a smile that was all wrong, stretched too wide. The Sasha in the glass looked delighted, almost gleeful. She dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, water splashing her feet. "Everything okay in there?" Her dad called from the living room, his voice barely masking irritation. She didn't answer, her eyes locked on the tiny shards of glass littering the kitchen floor. Her face, her reflection, stared up at her from 1,000 little broken pieces. And in each shard, the reflection was laughing silently, dark eyes glittering with malice. She stumbled back, feeling her head spin. Her breaths came in quick gasps, her chest tight with an icy terror she couldn't shake. When she finally returned to her room, she turned the mirror to face the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. But as she closed her door, she felt that same prickling awareness, as if someone was standing right behind her. She spun around, but there was only her shadow, stretching long and twisted across her room in the dim light. She laughed bitterly, trying to shake off the fear. It was ridiculous, all of this. She'd never felt like this before. It was like she was becoming someone else. The voice was back, faint and venomous, whispering at the edge of her hearing. "Let me in, Sasha." She screamed, clutching her head as her vision blurred, her mind filling with flashes of things she didn't understand. Images, dark corridors, a girl crying, blood-stained walls. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, drowning out everything else. And then, as quickly as it had come, the voice was gone, leaving an echoing silence in its place. She opened her eyes slowly, her body trembling, a cold sweat slicking her skin. She turned back to the mirror she'd tried to hide, pulling it off the wall with shaking hands. Her own face stared back at her, but it was wrong. It wore an expression she couldn't explain, amused, knowing. And then, the reflection winked. She stumbled back, horrified, her mind reeling. She could still hear the voice, faint now, slipping through her consciousness like poison. "Soon, Sasha. You'll let me in soon." With a strangled gasp, she ran out of her room, her footsteps echoing through the empty house. She didn't stop until she reached the street, her breath coming in shuddering gasps. Behind her, her bedroom light flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, leaving her window a dark, hollow eye staring back. And somewhere deep within, she felt a sinister satisfaction, creeping through her mind like a virus, like something dark that was no longer content to stay hidden. Sasha was no longer alone.